Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. Niccolo Machiavelli. I used to be that guy who believed everyone had good intentions. You know, the type who thought handshake deals were sacred and that people meant what they said. That naive worldview cost me exactly $47,000 and nearly destroyed my first startup back in 2018. My business partner, someone I'd known since college, had been slowly draining our company account while I focused on product development, trusting him completely with the finances. The wake-up call came on a Tuesday morning when our biggest client's check bounced. I rushed to the bank, only to discover our business account had $37 left. Mike, my so-called partner, had been using company funds for his personal expenses for months. Luxury dinners, weekend trips to Vegas, even payments on his new BMW. When confronted, he looked me straight in the eye and said I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. That's when Machiavelli's words hit me like a sledgehammer. I wasn't just naive, I was actively participating in my own deception. I had created the perfect environment for betrayal by refusing to verify, by avoiding uncomfortable conversations about money, by wanting so desperately to believe in the fairy tale of unconditional trust. The predator didn't have to work hard. I'd practically served myself up on a silver platter. The hardest pill to swallow wasn't the money I'd lost. It was realizing that while I was playing checkers, assuming everyone followed the same rules, others were playing chess, thinking 3 moves ahead. Mike hadn't suddenly become dishonest. He'd always been calculating, testing my boundaries, seeing how much he could get away with. I just chose not to see the signs, because acknowledging them would have meant admitting I'd misjudged someone I cared about. That experience taught me something crucial. Innocence isn't a virtue in the real world. It's an invitation for exploitation. Every day, millions of people get taken advantage of because they refuse to accept a fundamental truth. Not everyone plays by the same moral rule book. The world is full of Mikes, people who study your weaknesses while you focus on their potential strengths. I spent the next 6 months rebuilding, but this time I implemented what I call intelligent suspicion. Not paranoia, not cynicism, but strategic awareness. I started asking the uncomfortable questions, demanding documentation, and most importantly, I stopped making excuses for people's questionable behavior. The difference was immediate and dramatic. Better partnerships, clearer boundaries, and ironically, deeper trust with people who actually deserved it. The fascinating thing about developing this awareness is how it changes your social circle. Predatory personalities avoid people who ask too many questions, while genuinely good people respect your intelligence and boundaries. It's like installing a natural filter system. The right people stay, the wrong ones reveal themselves and leave. Looking back, losing that money was the best investment I ever made because it taught me to see reality as it is, not as I wished it were. Machiavelli wasn't being pessimistic about human nature, he was being realistic. Some people are genuinely good, some are neutral, and some are actively looking for their next mark. The transformation from naive to aware doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with accepting one uncomfortable truth. If something seems too good to be true, especially when it comes from someone with something to gain, it probably is. Your gut instinct is usually right, even when your heart wants to believe otherwise. Most people learn this lesson the hard way, through betrayal, financial loss, or emotional manipulation. But you don't have to be most people. You can choose to wake up now, to start seeing the game as it's actually played, rather than how you wish it were played. Since that day with Mike, I've helped dozens of friends avoid similar situations simply by teaching them to ask better questions and trust their instincts. The beautiful irony is that being harder to deceive doesn't make you harder to love. It just makes you harder to exploit. But recognizing that deception exists everywhere is just the first step. The real challenge comes next. learning to identify the specific tactics modern manipulators use to bypass your rational defenses and hook directly into your emotions. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. Niccolo Machiavelli. After my startup disaster with Mike, I thought I'd learned my lesson about deception. I was wrong. The real predators weren't just hiding in business partnerships anymore. They'd evolved, adapted, and moved into every corner of our digital lives. I discovered this the hard way in late 2019 when I fell for what I now call the perfect Instagram trap. Her name was Jessica, and her profile was flawless. Yoga instructor from California, traveled the world helping underprivileged children, posted inspirational quotes daily. We matched on a dating app, and within weeks, I was completely hooked. She'd text me at exactly the right moments, share personal stories that perfectly matched my interests, and somehow always knew the right thing to say when I was having a rough day. 3 months in, she had a family emergency in the Philippines. Her grandmother needed surgery, but the insurance wouldn't cover it. She needed $5,000, just temporarily, until her trust fund cleared. I actually went to the bank and wired the money. When I tried calling her the next day, the number was disconnected. Her Instagram account had vanished. Jessica, the yoga instructor who loved helping children, never existed. That's when I realized Machiavelli's principles had gone digital. The modern predator doesn't need to meet you face to face anymore. They can study your social media posts, learn your vulnerabilities, and craft the perfect persona to exploit them. Every like, every comment, every photo you share is data they use to build a psychological profile of your weaknesses. The scale of this new manipulation is staggering. Cambridge Analytica harvested data from 87 million Facebook profiles to influence elections. Fake influencers promote products they've never used to audiences who trust them like friends. Romance scammers steal over $1 billion annually from people looking for love. The tools of deception have become industrialized, automated, and terrifyingly effective. What makes digital manipulation so dangerous is its precision. Traditional con artists had to guess what would hook you. Now they know exactly what you want to hear because you've been telling them for years through your online behavior. They know you're divorced because your relationship status changed. They know you're struggling financially because you've been searching for side hustles. They know you're lonely because you engage with certain types of content late at night. I started researching this world after losing my $5,000, and what I found was horrifying. There are entire industries built around exploiting human psychology through digital channels. Romance scam operations in Nigeria employ hundreds of people who study American culture to perfect their deception. Cryptocurrency pump-and-dump schemes use sophisticated bots to create artificial social proof. Even legitimate companies use psychological manipulation techniques that would make Machiavelli proud. The most insidious part is how these digital predators make you complicit in your own deception. They don't just lie to you, they get you to lie to yourself. You ignore red flags because you want the story to be true. You make excuses for inconsistencies because admitting you've been fooled is too painful. They weaponize your own hopes and dreams against you. After the Jessica incident, I completely changed how I interact online. I started treating every digital relationship with what I call verification protocols. No more blind trust in profiles. No more emotional investments without real-world validation. No more financial decisions based on digital relationships. The internet is not real life, and people are not always who they claim to be behind a screen. The hardest part about waking up to digital manipulation is realizing how pervasive it is. Every notification is designed to trigger a response. Every algorithm is optimized to keep you engaged and vulnerable. Every platform profits from your attention, and they've hired the smartest people in the world to figure out how to capture and monetize it. But here's what I learned. Once you understand the game, you can play it better than the players. You start noticing the patterns, the psychological triggers, the artificial urgency. You develop what I call digital intuition, the ability to sense when something online doesn't feel authentic, even when you can't immediately explain why. The beautiful thing about mastering digital awareness is how it improves your real-world relationships too. When you stop falling for online manipulation, you become better at spotting manipulation in person. The skills transfer, the confidence builds, and suddenly you're operating from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. But recognizing digital deception is just the beginning. The next level is learning to identify the specific psychological techniques these modern predators use to bypass your rational mind and trigger immediate emotional responses. Topic 3. The law of intelligent suspicion. Question everything, always. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Niccolo Machiavelli. The Jessica scam taught me to be suspicious, but I didn't really understand what intelligent suspicion meant until I almost made another massive mistake in 2020. This time it wasn't romance, it was business. A venture capital firm called Apex Ventures reached out through LinkedIn, claiming they'd been following my work and wanted to invest $200,000 in my new project. The partner, David Chen, seemed legitimate. Harvard MBA, impressive portfolio, professional headshots. Everything about the pitch felt perfect, too perfect. They loved my business model without asking hard questions. They wanted to move fast, claiming other investors were circling. The term sheet arrived within 48 hours, professionally formatted with all the right legal language. David even offered to wire $50,000 immediately as a good faith deposit to show they were serious about closing quickly. But then I remembered Machiavelli's warning about appearances versus reality. Instead of celebrating, I started digging. I called Harvard's business school. No record of David Chen in their MBA program. I searched for Apex Ventures' other portfolio companies. Half didn't exist. The other half had never heard of them. The professional office address they listed was a UPS store in Delaware. Here's what really opened my eyes. I reverse searched David's headshots and found them on a stock photo website. This venture capitalist was actually using a model's photos from a dental clinic advertisement. The entire operation was designed to steal $50,000 from entrepreneurs desperate for funding. If I hadn't applied intelligent suspicion, I would have wired the money for due diligence fees and legal processing. This experience taught me Warren Buffett's golden rule in action. When someone with experience meets someone with money, the person with experience gets the money, and the person with money gets experience. The difference is that Buffett applies systematic skepticism to every deal. He doesn't invest in what he doesn't understand, regardless of how promising it looks on the surface. I started implementing what I call the three-source rule. Before trusting any important claim, I verify it through 3 independent channels. For David's firm, I should have checked business registration records, actual client references, and physical office verification. 1 source might lie, 2 might be compromised, but 3 independent sources rarely align if something's fraudulent. The psychological trick these scammers use is brilliant. They make you feel special and create artificial urgency simultaneously. We've been watching you specifically feeds your ego, while other investors are interested, triggers your fear of missing out. It's emotional manipulation designed to bypass your rational decision-making process and get you to act before you think. Real opportunities don't come with countdown timers. Legitimate investors do thorough due diligence. which takes time. Authentic business relationships develop gradually with increasing trust and verification. When someone wants to give you exactly what you want with minimal effort from you, that's not opportunity, that's bait. After dodging the apex, Venture's bullet, I started noticing these patterns everywhere. The real estate mentor who guarantees returns but needs course fees up front. The cryptocurrency expert who promises insider knowledge for a premium membership. The business coach who claims to have made millions but won't show tax returns. They all use the same playbook. Identify your desire, promise to fulfill it quickly, and create urgency to prevent analysis. The most dangerous part is how these scammers adapt their approach based on your background. They research your LinkedIn, your social media, your public interviews. They craft personalized hooks that feel like they understand your specific situation. David knew I was looking for funding because I'd posted about it. Jessica knew I was recently divorced because it was in my Facebook status. Modern predators don't cast wide nets, they use sniper rifles. I've now helped 3 friends avoid similar scams by teaching them intelligent suspicion. My buddy Marcus almost lost 20 grand to a business acquisition opportunity until I showed him how to verify the seller's claims. My sister Sarah nearly invested her retirement savings with a financial advisor who wasn't even licensed. The patterns are always the same once you know what to look for. The beautiful irony of developing intelligent suspicion is how it improves your relationships with legitimate people. When you ask good questions and verify claims, honest people respect your intelligence. They understand you're being prudent, not paranoid. Only scammers get defensive when you want to verify their credentials or slow down their timeline. But there's a crucial difference between intelligent suspicion and paranoid cynicism. Intelligent suspicion is strategic. You verify before trusting, especially when the stakes are high. Paranoid cynicism assumes everyone is dishonest, which prevents you from building genuine relationships and recognizing real opportunities when they appear. However, even with the best verification systems, predators are constantly evolving their tactics. The next level of protection requires understanding the psychological manipulation techniques they use to make you ignore your own suspicions and override your better judgment. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Niccolo Machiavelli. Learning to spot fake investment firms was one thing, but I didn't realize how deep manipulation ran in everyday situations until I started my new job at TechFlow Solutions in early 2021. My boss, Rebecca, seemed like the perfect manager at first, supportive, understanding, always talking about work-life balance. But within 2 months, I was working 60-hour weeks and somehow feeling grateful for the opportunity. It started innocently enough. "Hey Tom, I know you're swamped, but could you stay an extra hour today? The client presentation is tomorrow and you're the only one who really gets the technical details." Of course I said yes. It felt good to be needed, to be the go-to person. But that 1 hour became 2, then 3. Soon staying late wasn't a request anymore. It was just expected. The genius of Rebecca's approach was how she made every unreasonable demand feel like a compliment. "I'm giving you this project because I trust your judgment more than anyone else's. The executive specifically asked for you to handle this. You're so much more capable than the rest of the team." Each manipulation was wrapped in praise, making me feel special while she systematically destroyed my boundaries. I started documenting the patterns after my girlfriend Lisa pointed out I'd missed 3 dinner dates that month because of emergency work situations. Rebecca would create artificial urgency around everything. "The client wants this by Friday," when the real deadline was the following Tuesday. "The CEO is asking about this project," when she'd never actually spoken to him about it. Every task came with manufactured pressure designed to make me drop everything else. The psychological trick she used is called intermittent reinforcement, occasionally giving positive feedback to keep me hooked, while gradually increasing demands. It's the same principle casinos use with slot machines. Sometimes I'd get genuine praise or a small bonus, which made the long hours and stress feel worth it. I was literally addicted to her approval without realizing it. What made it worse was how she isolated me from potential allies. Don't worry about what the other developers think. They don't understand the big picture like you do. She'd give me information about company decisions and then say, "This is confidential, but I trust you," making me feel like an insider while actually cutting me off from people who might have warned me about her tactics. The breaking point came during a team meeting where she threw me under the bus for a project delay that was entirely due to her changing requirements 3 times. But she did it so skillfully. Tom's been working incredibly hard on this, and while we didn't hit our original timeline, his dedication is really admirable. She managed to criticize me while making it sound like praise, and I actually felt bad for disappointing her. That night, I called my mentor James, who used to work in corporate consulting. He laughed when I described the situation. "Tom, you're being managed like a mark in a con game. She's using textbook manipulation techniques, love bombing with praise, creating artificial scarcity with fake deadlines, and isolating you from reality checks. This isn't management, it's psychological warfare." James helped me develop what he called manipulation radar, specific warning signs to watch for in professional relationships, excessive flattery early in a relationship, creating urgency around everything, making you feel like the chosen one while subtly cutting you off from other perspectives, using your strengths against you by making unreasonable requests seem like opportunities. I started testing Rebecca's claims. When she said the client wanted something immediately, I'd follow up with the client directly and discover they'd never made such a request. When she claimed the CEO was asking about my projects, I'd casually mention it to colleagues who had direct access to executive communications. Every urgent situation turned out to be manufactured. Armed with this awareness, I completely changed how I responded to her tactics. "I appreciate your confidence in my abilities, but I'll need the real deadline and the actual client requirement in writing." That sounds like an important project. Let me check with the client to make sure I understand their priorities correctly. Suddenly, her manufactured urgencies started evaporating under scrutiny. The most revealing moment came when I started saying no to unreasonable requests. Rebecca's entire demeanor shifted from supportive mentor to frustrated controller. The mask slipped completely. She went from praising my dedication to questioning my commitment to the company. That's when I knew I'd been dealing with a manipulator all along, not a leader. Within 3 months of developing this radar, I'd identified 2 other managers in the company using similar tactics, helped a colleague recognize he was being manipulated by his business partner, and even spotted my own sister's boyfriend using emotional manipulation techniques during family dinners. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. They're everywhere. But recognizing manipulation signals is just the beginning. The real skill comes in understanding how predators build emotional dependency before they strike, turning your own psychological needs into weapons against you. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Niccolo Machiavelli. After mastering workplace manipulation radar with Rebecca, I thought I was immune to psychological games. I was dead wrong. In the summer of 2021, I met someone who taught me that the most dangerous predators don't look like predators at all. They look like saviors. His name was Marcus Thompson, and he almost convinced me to invest my entire savings in what he called the opportunity of a lifetime. Marcus approached me at a networking event in Austin, but it didn't feel like a pitch. He was genuinely interested in my startup experience, asked thoughtful questions about my failures with Mike and my recovery process. He shared his own story of building and selling 3 companies, name-dropping clients I could verify online. Within an hour, I felt like I'd found a mentor who actually understood my journey. The seduction process was so subtle, I didn't recognize it was happening. Marcus would text me articles about entrepreneurship with notes like, "Thought you'd appreciate this perspective," or "Reminded me of your situation with that investor scam." He introduced me to other successful entrepreneurs in his network, real people with actual businesses. Everything he did added value to my life with no apparent agenda. 3 weeks into our friendship, Marcus casually mentioned he was putting together an investment group for a revolutionary fintech startup. "I'm not looking for investors," he said, "but I thought you might be interested since you understand the pain points they're solving." He showed me a presentation that was genuinely impressive. Real technology, experienced team, major client contracts already signed. Here's where it gets brilliant. Marcus never asked me to invest. Instead, he created artificial scarcity. I've already got too many people interested, honestly. The founders are being really selective about who they let in. When I expressed interest, he said he'd see if he could get me a spot, but warned that the minimum investment was $50,000 and they were closing the round in 2 weeks. The psychological trap was perfect. He'd spent weeks building trust and demonstrating value. He'd made me feel special, like someone whose opinion mattered. The opportunity seemed legitimate because everything else about Marcus had been legitimate. And the artificial scarcity triggered my fear of missing out on something that could change my financial future. I was literally filling out wire transfer forms when my girlfriend Lisa asked a simple question: "Why is he doing this for you?" That stopped me cold. Marcus claimed to be worth millions from his previous exits. He had access to high net worth investors. Why would he need my $50,000? Why would he risk his reputation on someone he'd known for 3 weeks? That night, I did the deep research I should have done initially. Marcus's companies were real, but his role in them was exaggerated. He'd been a mid-level employee at 2 and a minor investor in the 3rd. The revolutionary fintech startup was legitimate, but they weren't raising money. They'd closed their funding round 6 months earlier. Marcus was running a side scam, collecting investments for a deal that didn't exist. The next day, I confronted Marcus with my findings. His reaction was textbook predator behavior. First denial, then anger, then attempting to flip the script. "I thought you were smarter than this, Tom. You're letting paranoia from your past experiences cloud your judgment on a real opportunity." When that didn't work, he tried to make me feel guilty. "I was trying to help you get in on something exclusive, and this is how you repay that trust?" That experience taught me about the 4-phase seduction process that sophisticated manipulators use. Phase 1 is love bombing, excessive attention, praise and value add with no apparent agenda. Phase 2 is trust building, demonstrating competence and introducing you to their network. Phase 3 is the setup, presenting an opportunity that seems perfect for your situation. Phase 4 is the close, creating urgency and scarcity to prevent thorough analysis. What makes this particularly dangerous is how they use your psychological needs against you. Marcus knew I was still recovering from being betrayed by Mike, so he positioned himself as the mentor I wished I'd had. He knew I was cautious about investments after the Apex Ventures scam, so he let me discover the opportunity rather than pitching it directly. Every move was calculated to bypass my defenses. The most insidious part is how they make you complicit in your own seduction. You start making excuses for small inconsistencies because you want the relationship and opportunity to be real. You ignore red flags because acknowledging them means admitting you've been fooled again. They weaponize your desire to trust and succeed against your better judgment. Since then, I've helped two friends recognize similar seduction patterns. My buddy Jake was being courted by someone promising access to exclusive real estate deals. My cousin Amy was targeted by a successful trader who wanted to teach her his system for a modest fee. In both cases, the four-phase process was identical, only the bait was different. But understanding the seduction process revealed something even more disturbing: how these predators create and maintain false personas specifically designed to attract their ideal victims. The masks they wear aren't random. They're precisely crafted psychological weapons. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. Niccolo Machiavelli. The Marcus incident taught me that predators don't just lie about opportunities, they lie about who they are entirely. But I didn't fully grasp the sophistication of false personas until I encountered someone who had turned deception into an art form. Her name was Dr. Alexandra Novak, and she nearly convinced half our entrepreneurship meetup group to invest in her breakthrough medical device company. Alexandra showed up to our monthly Austin Entrepreneurs meetup in late 2021, driving a Tesla Model S, wearing what looked like a $5,000 outfit, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd already conquered the world. She introduced herself as a former Stanford Medical School researcher who'd left academia to commercialize a revolutionary diagnostic device that could detect cancer from a single drop of blood. The presentation was flawless. Professional slides, complex medical terminology that sounded legitimate, testimonials from patients whose lives had been saved by early detection. She had FDA documents that looked official, partnership agreements with major hospitals, and even a prototype device that beeped and flashed lights convincingly. Everyone was mesmerized, including me, but something felt off, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Maybe it was how she deflected specific technical questions with vague responses about proprietary algorithms, or how she name-dropped famous investors but couldn't provide contact information because of confidentiality agreements, or how her backstory seemed almost too perfect. Brilliant researcher, successful entrepreneur, humanitarian saving lives. I started applying what I'd learned from the Marcus situation. First, I researched Stanford's medical school faculty records. No Alexandra Novak had ever worked there. Then I reverse-searched her prototype photos and found them on a Chinese manufacturing website selling medical demonstration props. Her FDA documents were expertly forged, but the reference numbers didn't exist in the actual FDA database. The deeper I dug, the more elaborate the deception became. The Tesla was leased under a company name that traced back to a UPS mailbox. Her expensive outfit was rented from a high-end clothing service. Even her business cards were printed on premium stock to feel more legitimate. She'd created an entire fictional identity down to the smallest details. What shocked me most was discovering that Dr. Alexandra Novak was actually Jennifer Walsh, a former pharmaceutical sales rep from Ohio who'd been fired for falsifying client reports. She'd spent months studying medical terminology, practicing her presentation, and crafting a persona specifically designed to appeal to tech entrepreneurs hungry for the next big breakthrough in healthcare. The psychological brilliance of her mask was how it combined authority, expertise, and altruism. She wasn't just selling an investment, she was offering the chance to save lives and make history. The medical degree gave her credibility, the Stanford connection implied intelligence, and the humanitarian mission made people feel good about writing checks. Every element of her persona was calculated to bypass skepticism. When I presented my findings to the group, the reactions were fascinating. About half the members were grateful I'd exposed the fraud before they invested, but the other half were angry at me for ruining a legitimate opportunity. Jennifer had been so convincing that even with evidence of her deception, some people preferred to believe the beautiful lie rather than the ugly truth. This taught me something crucial about mask detection. You can't just verify credentials and backstory. You have to test the person's reactions under pressure, look for micro inconsistencies in their story, and most importantly, observe how they respond when questioned. Genuine experts welcome scrutiny because they're confident in their knowledge. Fraudsters deflect, distract, or become defensive. I developed what I call the 5 mask tests, pressure testing their expertise with follow-up questions, asking for references from their past, looking for consistency between public and private statements, checking their reactions to unexpected changes, and observing whether they admit ignorance about anything. Authentic people pass these tests naturally. Personas crack under examination. The scariest part about Jennifer's operation was how close she came to succeeding. 2 members had already written checks for $10,000 each before I completed my investigation. If I hadn't spoken up, she might have collected over $100,000 from our group alone before disappearing to run the same scam somewhere else. Since then, I've spotted 3 other elaborate personas in professional settings. The former Google executive at a startup pitch event whose work history didn't check out. The successful day trader offering to teach his system who couldn't explain basic market concepts when pressed. The best-selling author whose books existed only as print-on-demand titles with fake reviews. But recognizing false personas is just one layer of protection. The more dangerous skill is understanding how these predators study your psychological profile to craft messages that feel personally tailored to your specific vulnerabilities and desires. He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner effects his ruin than his preservation. Niccolò Machiavelli. After exposing Jennifer's medical device scam, I thought I'd become pretty good at spotting fraudsters. But in early 2022, I almost made a mistake that would have cost me everything I'd rebuilt since the Mike disaster. This time, the deception was so sophisticated it passed my initial verification tests, and I only caught it because of pure luck and Ronald Reagan's old motto, trust but verify. The opportunity came through my friend Kevin, someone I'd known for 8 years and completely trusted. He introduced me to his business partner, Robert Chen, who was supposedly raising funds for a cryptocurrency mining operation in Texas. Robert had legitimate-seeming documentation, business licenses, facility photos, equipment invoices, even a visit to what appeared to be their mining warehouse in Dallas. Robert's pitch was compelling but not flashy. Steady returns, not get-rich-quick promises. He showed me tax documents from previous investors who'd made consistent profits. His LinkedIn profile showed 15 years of tech experience at recognizable companies. Even his warehouse tour felt authentic. Rows of mining computers, industrial cooling systems, professional staff who knew technical details. I was ready to invest $75,000, my entire emergency fund, plus a loan against my 401k. But something Kevin said during dinner made me pause. Robert's been doing this for 3 years, ever since he left Microsoft. That didn't match Robert's LinkedIn, which showed him leaving Microsoft 5 years earlier. When I mentioned the discrepancy, Kevin looked confused and said he must have misremembered. That tiny inconsistency triggered what I now call verification protocol. Instead of asking Robert directly, I started independently checking every claim he'd made. I called Microsoft's HR department to verify his employment dates. They had no record of a Robert Chen working there during the time frame he claimed. The business license was real, but it had been issued only 6 months earlier, not 3 years ago. The mining warehouse visit had been impressive, But when I drove by unannounced the following week, the building was completely empty. Robert had rented the space for a single day, brought in equipment from a legitimate mining company as props, and hired temporary staff to play roles. The entire operation was theater, designed specifically to pass basic verification tests. What made this scam particularly dangerous was how Robert had weaponized my friendship with Kevin. He'd convinced Kevin first, then used Kevin's genuine enthusiasm and trust to vouch for him. Kevin wasn't complicit. He was another victim who'd already invested $20,000 of his own money. The scam was designed to spread through trusted networks, using legitimate relationships to bypass skepticism. I spent the next week doing forensic-level verification. The previous investors with their tax documents were actors with fake identities. The equipment invoices were professionally forged using stolen letterhead from real companies. Even the positive Google reviews for his business were purchased from click farms in Southeast Asia. Every piece of evidence that had convinced me was manufactured. When I confronted Robert with my findings, his reaction was different from previous predators I'd encountered. Instead of getting angry or defensive, he calmly admitted to the deception and tried to recruit me as a partner. "You're obviously smart enough to see through this," he said. "Why don't you help me improve the operation instead of destroying it?" The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to turn my discovery into a business opportunity. This experience taught me that modern verification requires multiple independent sources and real-time confirmation. Don't just check credentials once, verify them through official channels. Don't just visit facilities during scheduled tours, show up unexpectedly. Don't just trust referrals from friends, independently contact the references yourself. Triangulation isn't paranoia, it's intelligence. I developed what I call the three-channel rule. Every important claim must be verified through three completely independent sources. For business investments, that means official government records, direct contact with claimed previous clients, and unannounced visits to physical locations. One source might be compromised, two might be coordinated, but three independent confirmations are nearly impossible to fake. The most valuable lesson was learning to verify in real time rather than relying on static documents. Business licenses can be forged, but calling the issuing agency gets you current status. LinkedIn profiles can be fabricated, but calling the companies directly reveals actual employment history. Photos can be staged, but unannounced visits show ongoing operations. Since implementing this verification strategy, I've helped 4 friends avoid similar elaborate scams. My neighbor Sarah almost invested in a profitable Airbnb portfolio that turned out to be photos of properties the seller didn't own. My cousin Mike was targeted by a successful Forex trader whose trading account screenshots were completely fabricated. Each time, systematic verification revealed the truth that initial impressions had hidden. But even with bulletproof verification protocols, there's one psychological weakness that predators exploit more effectively than any other: our inability to say no when pressured, especially by people we like or respect. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. Niccolo Machiavelli. After dodging Robert's cryptocurrency mining scam, I felt invincible. I had verification protocols. I could spot false personas. I understood seduction tactics. But I learned the hard way that all that knowledge means nothing if you can't deploy the most powerful word in the English language when it matters most. No. This lesson cost me $15,000 and nearly destroyed my relationship with my sister. The situation started innocently in spring 2022, when my sister Emma asked me to be a reference for her boyfriend, Jake's business loan application. Jake was opening a boutique fitness studio, seemed like a decent guy, and Emma was happy. Of course I'd help. But what began as a simple reference request slowly escalated into something much bigger and more uncomfortable. First, Jake asked if I'd co-sign the loan because his credit wasn't quite good enough on its own. "It's just a formality," he explained. "The business plan is solid, and Emma's helping with marketing. You'll never actually be responsible for anything." I felt uncomfortable but didn't want to disappoint Emma, so I said yes. Red flag number 1. I prioritized my sister's feelings over my financial security. Then Jake needed additional equipment financing and asked me to co-sign again. The first loan went through so smoothly, and this is just $20,000 more for essential equipment. When I hesitated, Emma got involved. "Tom, you're the only family I have. Jake's really trying to build something here, and your support means everything to us." The guilt trip worked perfectly. The final request came 2 months later. Jake needed $15,000 cash to secure a prime location before another buyer swooped in. "It's not a loan," he promised. "Consider it an investment. I'll give you 20% equity in the studio." Emma was practically in tears, talking about how this was their chance to build a life together. Against every instinct I had, I wrote the check. Within 6 months, Jake's fitness studio was bankrupt. The prime location had foundation problems he'd known about but hadn't disclosed. The equipment I'd co-signed for was repossessed, and my $15,000 investment evaporated along with Jake himself, who suddenly had to visit family in California and never returned. I was left holding $35,000 in debt and a sister who blamed me for not supporting them enough when times got tough. That experience taught me something Harvard Business School research confirms. People who can't say no earn 23% less over their careers and have 40% higher rates of stress-related health problems. My inability to disappoint Emma didn't protect our relationship. It destroyed it. My attempt to be supportive made me an enabler of financial irresponsibility. I realized I'd been treating no like a dirty word, instead of recognizing it as the foundation of all healthy boundaries. Every yes you give when you want to say no weakens your position and strengthens the other person's ability to manipulate you. Jake didn't respect my generosity. He saw it as evidence that I was an easy target for escalating requests. After losing that money, I developed what I call the no scale. 5 different ways to refuse requests based on the situation and relationship. Level 1 is soft deflection. I need to think about that. Level 2 is indirect refusal. That's not really my area. Level 3 is direct but polite. I can't do that right now. Level 4 is firm boundary. No, I don't mix family and business. Level 5 is final. I've already said no, and I won't discuss this again. The key insight was understanding that most manipulators test your boundaries with small requests before making big ones. Jake didn't start by asking for $50,000 total. He began with a simple reference, then gradually escalated. Each time I said yes, I was training him to believe that enough pressure would eventually break down my resistance. I was complicit in my own manipulation. I started practicing saying no in low-stakes situations to build the psychological muscle. No to unnecessary meetings at work. No to social events I didn't want to attend. No to sales calls that tried to create false urgency. Each small no made the bigger ones easier and more natural. You can't suddenly deploy strong boundaries in crisis situations if you've never practiced them in normal circumstances. The most shocking discovery was how saying no actually improved my relationships. People who respect you want you to have boundaries because it makes the relationship more authentic and sustainable. The only people who get angry when you say no are those who are trying to take advantage of your inability to refuse. My no became a filter that separated genuine friends from emotional predators. 6 months after implementing stronger boundaries, I had 3 different situations where people tried to pressure me into questionable commitments. Each time, a clear no ended the conversation immediately. The people who accepted my refusal gracefully stayed in my life. Those who argued or guilt-tripped revealed themselves as manipulators and naturally faded away. But even mastering the art of refusal isn't enough when dealing with sophisticated manipulators who've learned to read your body language and micro-expressions to calibrate their approach in real time. Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. Niccolo Machiavelli. Learning to say no protected me from obvious manipulation. But I didn't realize how much deception I was still missing until I met Detective Ray Martinez at a cybersecurity conference in Denver, fall 2022. Ray had spent 15 years with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, and during our conversation about my various scam encounters, he made an observation that changed everything. "Tom, you're good at analyzing what people say, but you're completely ignoring what their bodies are telling you." Ray explained that FBI interrogators catch more lies through micro-expressions than through verbal inconsistencies. "The conscious mind can control words," he said, "but the body reveals what people really think in the first 25th of a second before they can suppress it." He showed me iPhone videos from my encounters with Marcus, Robert, and even Jake, pointing out tells I'd completely missed while they were happening. In the Marcus footage from that networking event, Ray showed me 3 micro-expressions that screamed deception. When I asked Marcus about his role in his previous companies, his left shoulder did a tiny shrug lasting less than half a second, what Ray called micro-doubt about his own statement. When discussing the fintech investment, Marcus touched his neck briefly while claiming other investors were involved, a classic self-soothing gesture that indicates stress about lying. The most revealing moment was when Marcus described the startup's technology. For just a fraction of a second, his eyebrows pulled together in what Ray identified as cognitive dissonance, the expression people make when they're saying something they don't believe. "He knew he was selling you bullshit," Ray explained. "His face was telling you the truth, even while his mouth was lying." Ray taught me to establish what he called a behavioral baseline for each person during casual conversation. Then watch for deviations when topics became important. Most people have consistent patterns: how they hold their shoulders, where they look when thinking, how they gesture. When someone's lying about something significant, these patterns change in predictable ways. I started practicing with Paul Ekman's micro-expression training app that Ray recommended. After just 30 hours of training over 2 months, my ability to detect deception jumped from about 54% accuracy, basically random chance, to 89%. The improvement was so dramatic, it felt like developing a superpower I'd never known existed. The real test came in January 2023, when I met with a potential business partner named David Kim. He wanted me to join his e-commerce consulting firm, promising equal partnership and shared profits. But while his words were convincing, his body language was telling a completely different story. Every time he mentioned equal partnership, he did a micro-expression Ray had taught me to recognize, a brief tightening around the eyes that indicates someone is saying something they don't mean. When David discussed profit sharing, he unconsciously covered his mouth with his hand for a split second while explaining the compensation structure. Ray had called this symbolic blocking, the body trying to stop false words from coming out. Most telling was when I asked about his current partners. David's eyes darted down and left twice in quick succession, the classic pattern for accessing fabricated rather than remembered information. Based purely on these micro-expressions, I declined David's partnership offer despite his impressive business plan and financial projections. 2 months later, I discovered he'd used the same pitch to recruit 3 other equal partners, none of whom knew about the others. His consulting firm was actually a scheme to get people to work for free while he collected client payments personally. The power of micro-expression reading extends far beyond business situations. I started noticing when my girlfriend was stressed about work before she verbally expressed it, allowing me to be more supportive. I could tell when my mom was worried about my dad's health, even when she was trying to hide it. Reading people's genuine emotional states improved every relationship in my life. But the most valuable application was in high-stakes situations. During salary negotiations, I could see when my boss was genuinely considering my request versus when he was just going through the motions. In client meetings, I could identify which decision-makers were actually interested versus who was just being polite. The ability to read authentic reactions gave me a massive advantage in every important conversation. Ray warned me about one crucial limitation. Micro-expressions reveal emotions and deception, but they don't tell you why someone is being deceptive or what they're really thinking. You can see that someone's lying, he said, but you still need to figure out what they're lying about and whether it matters. Reading the signals is just the first step. Interpreting them correctly requires understanding the full context. However, even perfect micro-expression reading has one weakness that sophisticated manipulators have learned to exploit. They deliberately mirror your own behavior patterns to create false rapport and bypass your conscious detection systems. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Niccolò Machiavelli. My micro-expression skills served me well for months. But in spring 2023, I encountered someone who had clearly studied the same material I had. Her name was Patricia Williams, and she was trying to recruit me for what she called an exclusive investment opportunity in renewable energy infrastructure. What made her dangerous was how she controlled her own body language while expertly reading and manipulating mine. Patricia was smooth, no micro-expressions of deception, no nervous gestures, no tells whatsoever. She maintained perfect eye contact, used open body language, and even mirrored my posture subtly to create rapport. When I leaned forward, she leaned forward. When I crossed my arms, she did the same a few seconds later. She'd clearly been trained in the same behavioral techniques I'd learned from Detective Martinez. I realized I needed a different approach when standard detection methods weren't working. That's when I remembered something Ray had mentioned about FBI negotiators. When suspects try to control their behavior, we test their reactions by reflecting their own tactics back at them. The idea was simple. Use their manipulation techniques against them to see how they respond under pressure. Patricia was using artificial time pressure, claiming the investment opportunity would close in 72 hours. Instead of analyzing whether this was true, I mirrored her tactic. That's interesting timing. I actually have another exclusive opportunity that also closes this week. I need to decide between them by Thursday. Her composure cracked for just a moment, a brief flash of irritation that she quickly suppressed. When she emphasized how selective they were being about investors, I reflected that same energy. I'm being pretty selective too, actually. I've turned down 3 deals this month because they didn't meet my criteria. Patricia's response was telling. Instead of respecting my selectivity like a legitimate partner would, she immediately started working harder to convince me, asking what my criteria were so she could address them. The breakthrough came when I mirrored her emotional manipulation. Patricia had been using subtle guilt tactics, suggesting I might miss out on changing the world if I didn't act quickly. So I responded, "You know, I'd hate for you to miss your fundraising deadline because you spent too much time on someone who might not be the right fit." Her mask slipped completely. She went from patient advisor to desperate salesperson in seconds. What I discovered is that genuine people don't notice when you mirror their behavior because they're not consciously manipulating you. They react naturally, respond authentically, and treat the conversation as a normal exchange. But manipulators become uncomfortable when their own tactics are reflected back because it disrupts their sense of control over the interaction. I started testing Patricia more aggressively. When she claimed to have other interested investors, I said, "That's great. Maybe you should focus on them since they seem more committed." A legitimate opportunity would welcome that suggestion. But Patricia immediately backtracked, insisting she really wanted me specifically involved. The desperation was becoming obvious. The mirror tactic revealed what all my other detection methods had missed. Patricia's entire presentation was a script designed to trigger specific psychological responses. When I stopped following the script and started reflecting her techniques back at her, she couldn't adapt naturally. She was an actress playing a role, not a professional presenting a real opportunity. Within 2 hours of systematic mirroring, Patricia made 3 critical mistakes she'd avoided during our initial meetings. She contradicted herself about the investment timeline, couldn't provide specific details when pressed, and most damning, offered to make an exception to let me invest less than the stated minimum if I committed immediately. Real exclusive opportunities don't become suddenly flexible when you show resistance. I ended the meeting by saying, "I appreciate the presentation, but I need to consult with my financial advisor before making any decisions." Patricia's response was pure manipulation playbook. She questioned whether my advisor would understand the unique opportunity, suggested I might be overthinking a simple decision, and offered to speak with my advisor herself to answer any technical questions. The mirror tactic taught me something profound. Authentic people welcome scrutiny, questions, and delays because they're confident in what they're offering. Manipulators panic when you don't follow their timeline because their entire strategy depends on preventing you from thinking clearly or consulting others who might spot the deception. Since then, I've used mirroring to test potentially manipulative situations in both personal and professional contexts. My date, who kept cancelling plans, but got upset when I suggested we reschedule for the following week. My client, who demanded rush delivery, but became defensive when I asked for rush pricing. The real estate agent, who created false urgency, but got irritated when I applied the same pressure to her timeline. But even mastering behavioral reflection has limitations when dealing with the most sophisticated predators. Those who've learned to weaponize your own intuition against you by creating situations that feel right on a gut level, while being completely wrong on a logical level. One who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. Niccolò Machiavelli. After mastering mirror tactics with Patricia, I thought I'd developed every possible defense against manipulation. But in late 2023, I encountered a situation that taught me the most important lesson of all. Sometimes your gut knows things your brain hasn't figured out yet. This realization came during what should have been a routine business meeting that felt wrong from the moment I walked into the room, even though I couldn't explain why. The meeting was with Harrison and Associates, a consulting firm that wanted to hire my software development company for a 6-month project worth $120,000. Everything checked out on paper. Legitimate business registration, professional office space in downtown Austin, references from previous clients who confirmed successful projects. But sitting across from James Harrison and his team, I felt an inexplicable sense of unease. There were no obvious red flags. Harrison's credentials were verified, his team seemed knowledgeable, and their project requirements were clearly defined and reasonable. They weren't pushing for immediate decisions or using high-pressure tactics. Yet something deep in my stomach was screaming danger so loudly I could barely focus on their presentation. I'd learned to trust what Detective Ray Martinez called thin slice judgments. The rapid processing your brain does with millions of micro-cues you're not consciously aware of. Yale research shows that decisions made in 2 seconds have 67% accuracy, while well-considered decisions drop to 55% because overthinking often ignores intuitive warnings. Instead of dismissing the feeling, I decided to investigate it. I started paying attention to subtleties I might normally overlook. The office felt staged, too perfect, like a movie set rather than a working space. The team members' laptops all looked new and barely used. Most telling, when I asked casual questions about their daily routines and current projects, their answers felt rehearsed rather than natural. My breaking point came when Harrison mentioned they'd worked with several other development firms in Austin. I asked which ones, just making conversation, and he named 3 companies. I happen to know 2 of those firms personally. One had been closed for over a year, and the other specialized in marketing, not software development. Harrison had no way of knowing I'd catch those lies because they seemed like throwaway details. That night, I did deeper research despite everything appearing legitimate on the surface. Harrison and Associates was real, but it had been incorporated only 6 weeks earlier. The office space was a short-term executive rental. The previous clients who'd given references were connected to Harrison through a network of shell companies I traced through business registration databases. What I'd stumbled into was an elaborate advance fee fraud. Harrison's plan was to get me to start work immediately, then request startup costs for specialized equipment and security clearances. The $120,000 project was bait to justify $20,000 advance payments that would disappear along with Harrison himself once I'd transferred the money. This experience taught me something Michael Burry understood when he bet against the housing market in 2005. Despite mountains of data suggesting everything was fine, his gut told him something was fundamentally wrong with mortgage-backed securities. He followed that intuition, made the trade everyone called crazy, and earned $100 million when the market collapsed in 2008. I started keeping what I called an intuition journal, documenting my initial gut reactions to people and situations, then comparing them to eventual outcomes. After 6 months of tracking, my first impressions were accurate 83% of the time, even when I couldn't initially explain why I felt uncomfortable. The key insight was learning to distinguish between anxiety and intuition. Anxiety feels scattered and worried about general outcomes. Intuition feels focused and specific, a clear sense that something particular is wrong, even when you can't identify what it is. Anxiety makes you second-guess everything. Intuition makes you pause and investigate further. I've now helped several friends learn to trust their strategic intuition. My buddy Carlos avoided a partnership with someone who seemed perfect on paper but gave him weird vibes. The guy later tried to steal clients from his previous business partners. My neighbor Jennifer declined a job offer that looked amazing but felt wrong somehow. The company was investigated for fraud 8 months later. But developing reliable intuition requires more than just trusting gut feelings. The most sophisticated predators have learned to study and manipulate your decision-making process itself, creating situations designed to override both your logical analysis and your intuitive warnings. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Niccolo Machiavelli. Today marks 18 months since I started this journey with Mike's betrayal and my $47,000 lesson in naivety. As I write this, I'm a completely different person than the trusting entrepreneur who once believed handshake deals were sacred and people always meant what they said. The transformation wasn't just about learning techniques, it was about fundamentally changing how I see and interact with the world. Yesterday I had 3 separate encounters that would have destroyed the old Tom, but barely registered as inconveniences for who I've become. A financial advisor, cold-called offering exclusive investment opportunities with guaranteed returns. A LinkedIn connection tried to recruit me for a ground floor opportunity in a new cryptocurrency, a venture. A woman at Starbucks struck up a conversation about my laptop and somehow steered it toward her consulting business within 5 minutes. The beautiful thing wasn't just that I recognized each manipulation attempt immediately, it was how effortlessly I deflected them without anger, drama, or lengthy explanations. That sounds interesting, but I only work with fee-only fiduciary advisors to the cold caller. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I don't invest in anything I can't fully understand to the LinkedIn contact. Good luck with your business to the coffee shop predator, followed by putting on headphones. What struck me most was how these encounters actually strengthened rather than stressed me. Each successful deflection proved that my internal systems were working, that I'd developed true immunity rather than just temporary resistance. Like a vaccine that teaches your body to recognize and eliminate threats automatically, my mind now processes manipulation, attempts without conscious effort. The paradox Machiavelli understood is that becoming harder to deceive doesn't make you harder to love. It makes you easier to respect. Since developing these skills, my relationships have improved dramatically. Friends and family trust my judgment more because they know I don't make decisions from desperation or naivety. Business partners respect my due diligence because they understand it protects everyone involved. My girlfriend Lisa noticed the change. First, you're more confident now, but also more generous. It's like you can afford to be kind because you're not afraid of being taken advantage of. She was right. When you're no longer vulnerable to manipulation, you can engage authentically without constantly wondering about hidden agendas or ulterior motives. The most unexpected benefit has been how this awareness opened opportunities I would have missed before. Last month, I recognized that a client who seemed difficult was actually just and protective of his business because he'd been burned by previous contractors. Instead of being defensive about his questions, I appreciated his diligence, and we built a strong working relationship based on mutual respect for proper verification. I've also become someone others turn to for reality checks on potential scams, questionable opportunities, and manipulative relationships. In the past 6 months, I've helped 8 friends and family members avoid everything from romance scams to investment fraud to toxic employment situations. Teaching these skills to others has reinforced my own learning while creating a network of people who are harder to deceive. But the most profound change is internal. I no longer operate from fear, desperation, or the need to be liked by everyone. I make decisions from strength, clarity, and genuine choice rather than manipulation, pressure, or guilt. When someone tries to rush me into a decision, create artificial scarcity, or make me feel guilty for having boundaries, I recognize it immediately and respond accordingly. Machiavelli wrote about the lion and the fox, using strength to frighten wolves and cunning to recognize traps. I've learned to be both when necessary, but more importantly, I've learned when each approach is appropriate. Most situations don't require warfare. They just require awareness, boundaries, and the confidence to trust your own judgment. The journey from naive victim to strategic thinker isn't just about protecting yourself from predators. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts honest people while repelling dishonest ones. Your energy changes when you stop being afraid of being fooled. You carry yourself differently, ask better questions, and make decisions from a place of strength rather than weakness. Looking back, losing that money to Mike was the best investment I ever made, because it forced me to develop skills that have saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars and countless hours of stress. Every manipulation attempt I now deflect effortlessly would have succeeded against the old version of myself. The price of that education was steep, but the return on investment has been extraordinary. Sleep well tonight knowing that tomorrow you'll wake up harder to deceive than you were today. And remember, in a world full of people playing games you didn't know existed, the biggest advantage isn't being the smartest player. It's simply knowing that the game is being played at all.